Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, I want to talk about something that has come from a lot of different thoughts as I'm at Mass and just thinking about different things that both we say during the Mass that have come from the Bible and also things that we have discussed here on Father and Joe. And the thought that I've had that's come across to me is during the Mass, we always say, make it worthy that you can enter underneath my roof. And there are other gospel messages that say, be prepared. For instance, the brides, be prepared for when the groomsmen come. And during this type of the year, as we're preparing both for Advent and the end of ordinary time, it's around two themes: being ready for Jesus. And within the Christmas narrative, we see in a macro perspective that the world was not ready. Like literally, there was not a place to put him. And I think about these general conversations about being prepared for someone to come underneath your roof. And I just think about that in the context of my own world. In my own world, when I know I'm going to have people over, we have food ready. And there's a process of just having a meal ready. You got to have a time to prep it, time to cook it, and a ballpark idea of when people are going to be here so you can serve it. Because at least the way hosting is done in my household, for some reason, my wife's head, if food isn't out within 15 minutes, you have failed. For better or worse, it is the way in which she feels it. But that's also an impractical goal because you never know when someone is coming. You never know exactly what the flow of the event should be. So I bring this up using some of the analogies that the Bible has used about being prepared for Jesus and effectively bringing into our conversation of what does actually being prepared mean? Does it mean that the equivalent of your whole house is clean and there's a meal that's just been ready and the only way you could have kept it ready was having it in a crock pot, or having something super specialized that's only really hot for 38 seconds, but it's amazing during those 38 seconds? What is the way in which we should think about in the preparation for Jesus, whether that be the second coming or us getting called to him through death?
What is the proper preparation?
Yeah, I guess in a different way of saying that, how are we supposed to live our lives to prepare?
Yeah. Well, the prayers that you mentioned from the Mass are part of that preparation. Of course, the Mass itself is part of the preparation. Hearing His Word, making an offering of ourselves, engaging in faith, the realities that are there. The very process of receiving Him in the Mass is also an anticipation of receiving Him in our death, at the end of the world or at the end of our lives. So all of those things are preparation. And then the Church gives us specific prayers, like the one that you mentioned: Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed. So we're recognizing that we can't get ourselves ready on our own either. We need His help. We need His grace for that, His word to heal, to save, to make holy our souls. Those are kind of all the same word: heal, holy, and save. But so there are some specific prayers that the priest says too before receiving communion. By the will of the Father and the work of the Holy Spirit, through your death you gave life to the world. Free me by this your most holy body and blood from all my sins and from every evil. Keep me always faithful to your commandments and never let me be parted from you. Or another option that is offered to the priest is, may this receiving of your body and blood, Lord Jesus Christ, not bring me judgment and condemnation, but be for me a protection of mind and body and a healing remedy. So those are some specific prayers. Of course, it's not so much about the words. You know, your phone is better at praying than most of the rest of us. If it just comes to saying words, our devices can do it quite well, but it's actually meaning the words, of course, are what our devices cannot do. And so to mean words like that, to want to be faithful to his commandments, to want to never be separated from him, to know how much we need him to protect us and to heal us. So those are all the kinds of sentiments that we express from our hearts, which then, of course, require that we're actually aware of that. Do we know how much we need him? I would say that the practical atheism of our time is thinking that we don't need him, that he's basically an added extra, that it's a social construct, that it's a nice thing to do together, but that basically we don't need salvation and we don't need healing from sin. We don't need redemption. So do we actually know how much we need him? And that would be another way to prepare. Sometimes we're just going to Mass. It's a little bit like I often challenge our systems of higher education, of which I am deeply a part, but to say that we answer questions that haven't been asked. It's not until 10 years after college that you start to want the answers that you got during college and have forgotten in the meantime. But actually, so we end up going to Mass a long time, many times, before we're aware or without being aware of how much we need the Mass or how much we need that encounter with the Lord. And so just adequately preparing ourselves for the grace that we're going to receive, becoming aware of the need that we have for him, is a great way to prepare for him. And then that sort of generates the right cycle of, okay, well, it's because my life is a little bit of a train wreck that I need a savior. And now, having received the grace of salvation, his love encountering me in the midst of my sin, my failures, my brokenness, now I want to live in a way that I am faithful to him. And so then I ask the question, well, how do you want me to live, Lord? And of course, he says to his disciples at the Last Supper, love one another as I love you. So now go and do what you have received. Go and share what you have witnessed. And so that provides the guidance for us. But anyway, we're just sort of expanding into the entire Christian life at this point.
Well, there's something to that, right? I mean, that's one of the parts of the faith that I think it's overlooked, as you said, in our practical atheistic time, is that it's not like a baseball team where you need a power hitter to get everyone home, or, you need to have one skill set to be able to win the day. Pitchers don't really need to hit, etc. But in the faith, it all does blend into each other and build us up. And you brought up something that I've been having on my list of topics to discuss here, and it flows in really nicely as it was part of your answer, which is his commandment of to love each other as I have loved you. And the note that I have written here is that I don't think that's actually able to be comprehended. And I think that our watered down version of what I got in public school in second grade, which was the golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated, is understandable. And I think that if you just look at that it obviously derives from Jesus, that acknowledging that fact that love is something, divine love is something that is ungraspable, is something that I find to be really changing the scope of looking at an equation of life. I often think about why we create these episodes, and it's, in my mind, to show people why it's worth it. Why is it worth it to listen and follow the faith? And I can give tons of examples of how it has helped my life professionally, personally, and obviously in relationships. And it's hard to say that because on the one hand, like most creations of human beings, we know what the end game is and we know why it's worth it. Why are you running 2-a-days and running 100-mile-an-hour sprints and just keep running yourself like crazy? Well, so I can go win the Super Bowl. Okay, that's very tangible. We can see that. but we can't, at least in my opinion, I don't think that we can fully grasp what God's love is. And there's a lot of saints who have said the same thing. So I don't think I'm completely wrong in that notion.
Well, certainly not completely grasped. I mean, it is infinite as God is infinite, and so there is a mystery that will never be fully comprehended. But we can get some of it, of course, and that's what can we grasp? Well, uh, obviously, God's love is fully demonstrated for us on the cross and is extended to us in the Eucharist. We can begin to comprehend what he has done for us personally. Although, admittedly, it takes a bit to really face the effects of sin, to face how damaging, how absolutely destructive and impossible to redeem our sin is, the destruction that we do in relationships, and the ways that we've destroyed ourselves as his creation. Our willful rebellion, and then as in the many ways it expresses itself through our weakness, and we do a lot of damage. And so to actually be aware of that is, anyway, it takes a certain level of sophistication. We sometimes get it, I mean, somebody who has, I don't know, I mean, developed some self-destructive tendencies around alcohol or drugs, or who has simply neglected the duties of work and family in a way that dependents on that person have really suffered, have borne the weight of that person's failure. Then we get a taste for, like, how can I ever make up for this? And then, of course, that drills us deeper into despair and makes us want even more to cover things up with drugs and alcohol and to escape and avoid. And so you can see the real downward spiral, the real negative feedback loop that can happen from that kind of thing. That's a more clear example of how destructive sin is in our lives and the lives of others, and that we can feel is really impossible to come back from. And to see that Christ does that. He is uniquely able to work all things to the good because he actually gets in there. He bears the suffering of the spouse and children who were abandoned by the alcoholic husband and father, and he suffers with them, and he finds ways to bring them through to a better place. He remains with the alcoholic and father, and is in the gutter with him, and suffers with him, and stays with him, and finds ways for him to make small choices even that are open to love and open to others. Anyway, we are hardly willing to do any of that. We don't want to stay with those who are suffering. We don't want to stay with those who have caused suffering. We want to just turn our back and walk away and do something else. And so just to see the extent of that love that Christ shows us, that he really is in the midst of all of that, the mess of all of that. And that's a great example for us, and an invitation to do that as well. So those are, some ways that we see his love for us, and again, we experience that somewhat personally. We sometimes feel like I have not done anything to earn this, and he has lifted me out of the mire and has set me on stable ground. And I just look at my life in awe and wonder that I ever got here. So we can have experiences like that to draw from, to see the greatness of his love for us, and then try to extend that in some small way to others. That's but as you said, the love, to do to others as you would have them do to you is a starting point for sure of understanding that, and then just taking that up level after level to get to the point of doing unto others as Christ would do to them.
Yeah, and you think about how challenging this is, and how this whole episode started with the need of how do we prepare ourselves, and it's all a continuous action. And I guess in that way, you've really poked a hole in what I felt my initial analogy was, which was having someone enter under your roof, as obviously we say during the Mass, but not to look at it as just to come over as a guest, but to have it as being a lifelong relationship. And I guess that taking that analogy further is that when you're dating someone, you might only be doing the meal time together. But when you're actually married and living together, it's not always time to eat. There are all these other things that come into play. And it's also expected that there's going to be times when we're cleaning up after and times when we're preparing. And that it's not always going to be the cleanest house in the world. Sometimes there's going to be messes for all kinds of various different reasons. And that as long as there's an effort of pulling yourself towards God, that it will be in the direction. And Father, one of the other things that you said in there, that just to kind of put a conclusion on today's episode, was you put the word holy right there with saving. And I never really thought of them as in the same category. I thought holy was like this whole other thing. And I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of bring this whole episode in conclusion here as we prepare for the next week.
Yeah, we can think of salvation and sanctification as on the same spectrum, which are really filling up with love. It's love that pours into us in the places where we are really lacking, deprived, broken. And then that love continues to overflow and builds us up. And it is, so it's all kind of the same spectrum. But the word salvus in Latin, which is the word to save, is also the word for healing. And healing is, you can sort of hear the similarity of healing and holiness and health. All of those things kind of go together. Salvation, healing, holiness is health. All of those things kind of fit together, but it's all the consequence of love. Love being poured into our hearts, love being extended into our lives. And the greatest love is the one that reaches all the way into the depths and then fills us up to become like himself, able to love as he loves. And so that really builds us up to be holy. Holiness is the perfection of love. That's how we understand it in Christianity. So that's all receiving his love and then allowing it to really fill us up and flow through us is the whole thing.
Yeah, it's an amazing element. So we thank you all for being with us, and we will be with you again next week.